with the finals recently coming out, which is like a 3v3v3 team-based, competitive-ish, but very fun shooting game, Tekken 8 and Uni 2, Under Night In-Birth 2, System Celeste, or Sys Celeste, right around the corner, and the impending balance patch for Street Fighter 6 eventually. We're assuming we'll get one right after Capcom Cup. With these things coming up, there's a lot of talks and a lot of discussion about people's wants for brand new video games, and why don't video games come out and not require balance patches? Why is it not a perfectly working product right out of the box? Do other mediums have this problem? And the first thing I want to say is yes. Every medium could have a better version of itself exist. And I think that there's been times in history where people figure that out and things are changed, eroded. Rules are changed. There is a patch, as it were, right? So, essentially, I want to look at some of, like, the biggest ones I can think of, just to, like, quell everyone's worries, right? Because the finals just came out. Uni 2 is about to come out. Tekken 8 is about to come out. And people are like, I want these games to be perfectly balanced right out of the gate. I'm going to let you know. Devs are trying their best, but it's probably not going to happen. It probably will never happen. And the reason for that is because it's so hard to perfectly balance a game with the best players in the world trying to break it. Whether it's a video game or a sport, because we have some sports references in here, which is very strange. We actually are looking completely outside of the fighting game genre at two different things, two separately different games. To show you guys that there have been major changes, major erratas, major patches to some of the other competitive games and things to exist out in the world. The first thing we'll look at is this thing right here. Have you guys ever heard of this? We're looking at Magic the Gathering. We're looking over at Magic the Gathering. Have you guys ever heard of Mana Burn? You guys ever heard of this? So, what Mana Burn is it is a very old term in Magic the Gathering, and I say it's old because it no longer exists. What it is say you cast a swamp by adding 1 mana, and the description's here perfectly, actually. So I guess we'll use that description. For instance, if a player tapped a swamp to cast Dark Ritual and added 3 mana to their mana pool, then cast Urg Raiders, which cost 2 mana, then let the phase end, and didn't spend the remaining 1, that player would lose 1 life for Mana Burn. Any unspent mana in between phases, moving from one phase to another, would cause you to lose life equal to the amount of mana not spent. Burnt, as it were, right? Letting mana sit around is considering Mana Burn. And you lose 1 life per mana loss that way. Or, you used to. This rule is from very, very early Magic the Gathering, and it no longer exists. The last time it existed was in 2009. Magic the Gathering is over 30 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So this rule existed for more than half of its existence. Or close to. Damn near close to, right? A really long time with Mana Burn existing before removing it. I don't think it was half. Maybe a little less. It's been removed. That is a major change to the way you are allowed to spend mana and think about mana, right? It means that's 1 less resource you have to keep track of, because if you accidentally make too much mana for some crazy combo you're doing, or for a ramp sequence, if you make too much, you don't have to worry about losing that mana as a phase ends. I'm sorry. You still lose that mana, but you don't have to worry about losing life for that mana dissipating, for that mana disappearing, for that mana being burnt, as it were. Right? And this is a very old example. This is an example that goes all the way back to the original origins of Magic the Gathering. It's existed for a really long time. There's a more recent example. If you look up a set called Ikoria Lair of Beasts, or Lair of Behemoths, I think. There was a new card type that existed in that set. I think they've only created cards with that card type in that set. They're called Companions. Companions are if you get a certain requirement that's on the companion generally, you can play it outside of the game and bring it into the game at any point. In competitive terms, this would mean that you played it in your side deck, and you could bring it in from your side deck in the middle of a game. Didn't matter if it was game 1, game 2, game 3, your companion was always available to be brought out as long as you fulfilled its condition and spent the mana to cast it. We can look at some along the lines of Lurrus, Umori, and Yorion. Those are the 3 that I think of the most. Go ahead and feel free to look those cards up. They all have differing levels of success and power. But there was a rule change quickly after they were created, where instead of you playing the card, and then only having to use its mana cost to put it into play directly from your sideboard, you now, for every single one of these, for every single companion, you have to first. This is a wiki, so I'm gonna get like the nerd shit. I don't care. I don't want to see that. You now first have to pay 3 mana generically to put any companion into your hand before you can cast it. This specific card, because it costs 3 mana, that means you are doubling its mana cost essentially, slowing it down and making it significantly weaker than it was on launch. When this originally came out, that's not how it worked. When this originally came out, oh, they don't show the errata. Yeah, paying 3 to put the companion in your hand is a special action. This did not matter. This did not exist. This is when it launched. This is when it launched. 2 months later, they errated it. 2 months. 2 months of you being able to play these for just their mana cost, and then they made it so you had to pay 3 mana generically first to put them into your hand. Now, not every single one of these was super broken, but there was a good standout of them that were, and just having an 8th card in your hand at all times was deemed too powerful. So, basically, they patched the entire mechanic of Commander. They errated the entire mechanic of companions. I said Commander, didn't I? Oops, it says companion on the card. That's another example, right? Just 2 alone in Magic the Gathering. And these are big shakeups. These changed a lot about the game. Right? This was really recent. This was 2020. And then the one before that was 2010 with the removal of mana burn. You could also say damage on the stack, but I think I'm getting ahead of myself adding too many examples from Magic the Gathering. I don't think we need to talk about that. Right? Let's move over. We won't even look at a shooting game, right? You're like, okay, well, you looked at a card game. You always talk about card games, shooting games, and fighting games. Your next example must be from a shooting game, right? Well, I mean, if you're talking about shooting the basketball, absolutely. That's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the 5 lowest scoring NBA games of all time. Actually, I think we really only look at the 2 lowest. Because there's a very key thing that's mentioned in the second part of this article. I already knew about it, but I want to kind of show it off. So the Fort Wayne Pistons versus the Minneapolis Lakers. This was in November. This was in 1950. November of 1950. It was the lowest scoring of all time. As silly as it gets before the shot clock era. Whoa. Before the shot clock era? So if I explain what happened, let me go ahead and close this. I'll explain what happened. Essentially, this game was the lowest scoring NBA game of all time because back then there was no timer, so there was no reason to shoot the ball. You would just play hot potato and keep it away from the opposing team, especially if you had a lead. That's why this ended 1918. They needed to keep that lead for as long as possible to beat the other team. Now, the reason why is because they had a player on the other team that was so tall, he could goaltend and stop anyone from shooting the basket. That's not a joke. That is real. So this was the actual initial inception and patch to basketball that created 2 different mechanics for the game. 2 different rules, as it were. The shot clock and goaltending. Neither of these things existed before 1950 because it was completely illogical that people would try not to just shoot the basketball. No one thought about it until it became a necessity, until it became a way to break the enemy team, the opposing team, the opposition, and no one thought anyone was tall enough to stand next to the goal and stop anyone from shooting a basket. It was just unfathomable. Once these 2 things happened, they realized that they needed to change the game for the better, to make it a more endurable spectator experience and a better playing experience. Because I promise you the basketball players probably don't want to play professional hot potato, and I'll tell you right now, spectators definitely don't want to watch that. We could go even further back. Before the 1950s, when basketball was first invented, did you know dribbling wasn't a thing? Did you know the act of passing the ball to yourself was not something that people thought of originally? Because you cannot move with the ball in your hand. You cannot take a step while the ball is in your hand. Apparently, that's the way it's supposed to work. But dribbling is the key to do that. You're passing the ball to yourself to continue moving while holding the ball. Basketball was played without dribbling for years And now it's been played for so long with dribbling that we'll never think of basketball without dribbling ever again. But that was another major shakeup in basketball. That's 3 major shakeups in basketball. Created a new rule set that patched the game in a way that makes the game more enjoyable to watch. Same thing with Magic the Gathering. So these things, right out of the gate, which are very tenured games, very, very known spectator sports that people enjoy watching. These are things that, and even enjoy playing, right? Let's just talk about the players for a minute. Nobody wants to play a boring game. Nobody wants to play a stale game. But also, most of the time, most people don't want to play an overpowered and over-centralized game, right? So, these rules, these patches, these erratas are put in place for cards, for sports, for teams, for times, for all these rules are put into place to make the game more enjoyable to play and watch, right? We could have just added a shot clock and then like, well, if you're tall enough to goaltend, just goaltend, bro. There wasn't even a term for goaltending. It wasn't a thing. No one thought of it. But they did both. Not only did they make teams have to deal with him by making a shot clock, they also nerfed him by making a goaltending rule. I can't remember the name of the player. I think it was like George Mikan, I think. He was super tall. I think his name was George Mikan. George Mikan, American basketball player. Yeah, he was 6'10". Damn, that's a tall guy. Listed height. Yeah, 5'10". That's what it says here. I'm sorry, 6'10". My bad. I think that's not that tall now, right? There's definitely basketball players taller than that. But apparently this guy would just stand there and there's the picture of him doing it. Look, there's the picture of him goaltending. What a shithead. These rules were put in place, these patches, these changes happened to better the life of the game, to better it for viewability and for playability, right? So don't worry about your favorite games coming out and not being perfect, not being the most balanced things in the world. Those things will come with time. The main thing we want is for our games to be enjoyable, hopefully, as much as they can right out of the gate. No one gets it perfect, right? There's even been rule changes in games like hockey, baseball, basketball, international football, soccer, as it's called in America. All of these things have had rule changes. Yu-Gi-Oh! I can mention so many other examples. Feel free to try to put some in the comments down below if you know any crazy rule changes that have happened to better the way a game functions. Years after, months after. Those are balance patches. Fighting games aren't ruined by balance patches. They're generally helped, hopefully. That's the dream. And so are these other games. Right? Balance patches aren't the worst thing in the world. They generally add more to the game, right? Taking away things generally is only reserved for things that are over-centralized. That's what the hope is. But basically, the whole of this has been, don't be afraid for your favorite game to come out and be unbalanced, because that means there's room for it to grow. Whether that be a shooting game, a card game, a fighting game, even a sport. Changes exist on all of these mediums because of the fact that nothing comes out perfect. And it only gets better with time. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the talk segment, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. We're really close to 500 subscribers. It'd be really cool if I could get there. That'd be nice. Comment down below any rule changes, any patches, any erratas to your favorite card games, sports, shooting games, fighting games that change the games for the better, maybe even for the worse. Anyways, it's been Beanie Thuggish talking about balance patches across mediums. Signing out and saying peace.